Hello, and I hope you are well. And in this video, let's create a little React project I would like to show to you so we can speak about state and about good practices in React. So to do so, well, let's build our project. We can even go to have a folder. Usually for organization, it's nice to have all of your projects in code folder. Now it's up to you. You can have code base, project as well. Those are like quite common conventions developers are using in their computer. So as you can see, if I do pwd to see the path, print working directory pwd, and here you see I have users, my user, and then code. So now we can do npm init, it was npm create, I think init, that was, npm init actually. We don't need to do create, and then vit, and here latest, and then the name of the project. So in my case, I will just do like probably to be example, or example, or learning code for you. Perfect. And in my case, by teaching, it helps me to be a better teacher, so it helps me to learn as well. And here I will choose React TypeScript because we want TypeScript. And then here I can do cd learning code and then npm install. In some previous videos you may have seen from me, I was doing npm init and then vit latest, name of my project, and then I was using template react ts. This is actually no longer needed. If I look at some history, you see I was doing that. That's actually no longer needed. So you don't need this because Vite will ask you if you want it in TypeScript or not, as you can see. So you don't need this. And now npm install, or I for a shortcut. I prefer to write less, so I just do npm I. It's just easier. So during that time, I can sip my coffee. And here I can just do cd learning. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm already in the folder of our project, so I can do npm run dev to run our web development server. Wonderful. And here we can just create, probably I will open a new tab here, cd code, and then it will be learning project, learning code. I will open it. And here, the first thing I would like to share with you are the states. So when you use the default value here, it will not be re-rendered. Indeed, you have to be careful with optimizations and so on. And sometimes we are wondering, so I should use it in a useState. And then if I do empty squares here, it's the same. It will not be re-rendered for the subsequent renders. But when I have my initial values, so the initial states here, it will be the same. So if I mention my function, for instance, I want to store, let's say it will be session token, and here to be set session token, and it will be a UUID, a GUI v4. I will just install that as a package. It's npm I UUID. I suggest you to have a look. So UUID npm. So UUID, the name is also GUID, but UUID is like the new name, I would say. Nowadays it's more common than GUID, GUID. And here, npm, that's a package we'll install. So npm install UUID. And once it's installed, which is the case now, I will be able to use it. So I can just import this, import v4 as UUID v4 from UUID. Beautiful. We just create an alias here. And here, what I will do, we do useState. and I will do like this. So, you know, we let useState to call UUID, and we don't call the function directly. And this way, it will not be re-rendered. It will be only re-rendered on the first initial rendering, and that's it. So make sure we don't re-render the function on every render on subsequent calls. Beautiful. Like GitHub Copilot knows exactly what I had in my mind. Subsequent renders, we can say as well. Perfect. And here I will use this one. I can use anywhere. So let's say I need to use it for a specific URL. For instance, here I have React logo, and let's say I need to call it, let's call it that way. And then we do, let's say we have we need a session token, like for cache or something like that. And here to be our session token. And that will work just like this. You see, so that's the purpose. And we can use a set. Of course, set is just a prefix. It's better to use set. That's a convention, but I could have done like this if I want to. It's not recommended, but with useState, you have first here the getter and here the setter. And that's the initial value we set to. And by setting the initial value like this, we make sure that we don't re-render every time on subsequent renders the value for optimizations, and sometimes it's for other reasons too. Now, something else I want to speak, and that's about useEffect as well, and useState actually. Mostly about useState, you will understand. If I set a useState here, let's say I want to set my session token and directly set in a value. Here, I will not, if I want to retrieve, so retrieve now the value, and I do console log session token, this won't work because React will not directly set the value. It will be in pending state, and the sessions token with the states in React, session token will not have the value directly. It will be like scheduled until everything is done, and then until all of the other things React has done, it will be available for the next stage, let's say. So I could have done here on that useState, for instance, then I will be able to have session token value. Or even here in my rendering, I will be able to have the session token. But here, directly after it, this one will be an empty string. Of course, here's not the case, but if I did, that's the type string, if I did empty string here, it will be just empty string. And we have to make sure that we have to be aware of this. We have to know, oh, this is actually a bug. What I could do is then to use another useState to retrieve my session token, because here to be available. Well, that's not good practice because it's easy to break. Since we use two useStates to get a value, it's basically an ugly code, very easy to break and very hard to maintain. So what we recommend to do, we should do like let session token here, the value, and then I set the useState here. And then after, I can do console log session token. It will be actually something different. Like, let's say I will call it token. Token, and here in our case, we can do a constant token and token. And that will work. And if I want to do a condition, if we have session token, then amazing. Then we can just do like here to be a let, and here to be like token equals session token. Otherwise, we set the value. and here to still be token. And then here we can have token or somewhere else if we need in the same use state. But we have to make sure that when we set a state, it will be not directly available by React. It will be in the pending state, and it will be scheduled in the React lifecycle to be available in a later state. So that's something important to be aware of as well. And again, here, useState, if I don't want the useState to run, to be called on every render, I can use an empty array, or to only be refreshed, to only be triggered on specific cases. For instance, only when session token changes, then I can use session token inside. And actually, if you do empty array useEffect, you will see. You see, the useEffect syntax is used when you want the effect to run only once after the initial render. Initial render is the first one, similar to the initial value we set to the useState, and not on subsequent renders. This is equivalent to the component date mount lifecycle, because in React you have multiple lifecycles, and that's the one they speak is the component date mount lifecycle method in class components, which nowadays no one uses OOP class for React. OOP stands for Object Oriented Programming. This one, if you wonder to OOP. So here, the empty array means that the effect does not depend on any values from the component scope. If we want to depend from one, here, for instance, session token, it will depend on one value, session token. If we update the session token, it will update the useEffect. That's important to know. And if you type actually useEffect React, the React documentation, it's amazing. Here's the legacy one, but the legacy one for some reason is always on the top of Google if you search. Not too sure why. The new one is not, it's a bit lower in the search. Maybe it's not as good for SEO than the other one, or just because it's older, it has more, backlinks and so on. That's why it's always on the top. But always when I search for something, I go to the legacy one, and that's the new documentation, react.dev. But you see, the legacy one is on the top. But we can go to the new one actually. And here it speaks also about if we speak renders, the parameter. Maybe I will go to the old one. I'm so familiar to the old one. Oops. Oh, here we are. So, perfect. Yeah, actually, I do prefer the old one. If you use the optimization, yeah, so use this optimization. Make sure the array includes all values from the component scope, such as props and state, that change over time and that are used by the effect. So that way the effect will have the accurate values and you will not have weird behaviors. If you don't mention one, you will say, why it's not there? Why the value is not there? But the user does change that, or that value did change from the database, from the API call. It's because you didn't mention that there in the square brackets in the array. So this is why it's important. Otherwise, your code will reference still value from previous renders. So this is why it's important. And the previous value because it wasn't updated. If you want to run an effect and clean it up once, you can pass an empty array. So this is like where we don't need to change anything. Just on the initial render, we need the initial values and then we don't have to change anything after that. So empty array as a second argument. So second is because you have the first argument and then here's the second of useEffect. This tells React that your effect doesn't depend on any values, property state. So it will never need to rerun, here it will rerun only if we update session token. Yeah. And yeah, this isn't handled as a special case. And yeah, that's it. And if we don't use this, it will rerun every time. So that's not ideal usually. So usually we mention what we need to be updated, on what values, on what properties the useState depends of. Otherwise, it will be just empty. But not having the array as second argument is not recommended for optimization. All right, so I hope this helps. I hope you did like it, and I'm not sure if you prefer. We recommend using that package like useEffect, no second argument optimization. You will see it's not very good. UseEffect without. No, actually, read it. Yeah, that's okay. This and specific time you will want to use useEffect without any dependency array. Probably the most common situation is keeping a ref up to date without external properties. Yes. First we'll run effect. Anyways, so yeah, I recommend you to do that. Two things, not passing second argument. This about this case. We'll clean up, you see the previous value effect in the return function was specified, and run a new effect on each render of the component. So you have to be careful. They're both okay. So it's an empty array, that's what we spoke, will be cleaned up with the return function, run an initial say, and on mount effect. And then you will initial the render value on change on any parameter specific. When it depends of any of other values of other variables. So yeah, that's always good to know. And yeah, that's pretty much it. You have a lot of documentation, like you can see. So I suggest you to always be curious, always look for new things. Like here, also you have plenty of documentation. I like to show you documentation in real time because so that way it helps you to do research and you see how you can do research easily. Now you can use, of course, ChatGPT or other AI tools. Very handy. Copilot, for instance, I use it as well. But it's also nice sometimes to look by yourself on Google because sometimes you use a language where there are not so much data and so you have to look more deeper because the AI tools out there are not that handy anymore. React is very handy because there's so much information out there, but something like Erlang or Phoenix framework, it's not very mainstream, and so it's harder for AI tools to give accurate information, So here again, I only need to track, see, so you can just scheme, like you can scan the text a little bit, and you just take what's very needed. Don't spend too much time, just scan it. A bit like this, and so you see, okay, and we were speaking about useEffect, so Command F, you just search, you see, okay, that's one, and you look, okay, and here, it's always handy. So I hope this helps, and I wish you a happy coding and see you in a other video. Oh, and one more thing I just noticed now by reviewing my code, and this is why code reviews are extremely important, or just making sure that you check what your IDE says. Like here for my case, my IDE is Visual Studio Code, and it says that the variable cannot be found. It cannot be found, it's obvious. You can even have some CI pipelines that helps you to have this kind of check, or those kind of pre-commit hooks on Git that will do the kind of pre-check, so preliminary checks, and that does help always. So in my case, what I had is because it's UID v4, and while I'm fixing this, I wanted also to share with you that you don't only have to do that way, you can do that way. So useState will call the function, so we don't want to have that function being triggered already now at this stage, but just like this, only the name of the function, and useState will call it, will run it, or you can just use it as anonymous. like a anonymous function, and it will have exactly the same effect. So if we just wrap it in a anonymous function, anonymous because there's no name, as you can see, it's a arrow function, anonymous function, either that way or that way. I hope it helps.